We're gonna talk about why people are choosing Astro, how your Webflow mindset transfers over, what are these magical islands that Astro has. Then we'll talk about branching, which is an enterprise feature in Webflow, but comes for free in Astro. And finally, we will deploy the project to Vercel. So let's start with why Astro, especially if you're coming from Webflow. Astro will be the easiest one to understand from your standpoint because it is very close to just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for this, I'm going to show you an example of a component, how you would build it in Astro and how you would build it in Next.js. So I have this card component in Webflow, and I'm going to show you what this would look like in Astro and in React, which would be what you would use in Next.js. And you can see on the right, we have the props for this component. If we go to Astro here, you just define what your props are at the top. This is just for TypeScript. In theory, you can also remove this and just keep this. And then down here, you just have your regular HTML. So we just have a div with the class of card, a span with the class of card badge, an h3 with the class of card title. All the rest of the elements are there. And then you just put your props, whatever you want inside the elements. And then down here, you define your styles. So all the styles that belong to this card will be right next to the component itself. And if you use multiple cards, these won't be inserted multiple times. Like if you put these CSS classes in an embed inside a Webflow component, these are inserted once by Astro. It knows how to deal with them. And this part here is just a slot where you can put extra stuff if you want. Now, if you look at the React version, you have to first define the component by writing export default function card. Then you define all your properties in here. And then you have to return parentheses, put your div. If you don't want to use an external CSS file, then you have to inline your styles like this. And maybe it would have been a more fair comparison if I put the CSS in a separate file. What I wanted to show is that you cannot just put the CSS directly in the React component. You have to deal with the styles in a different way. And that's why many people resort to Tailwind. So this is a simple example, but it does show the simplicity of Astro. And this translates to the entire framework itself, where with Next.js, you would have to know all the specifics of Next.js, while Astro has a lot less of these and a lot of built-in performance for you. So now we will start a fresh Astro project by going to astro.build, and you can just copy this over here. If you already have NPM installed and you've done other projects, you can just copy this. If you haven't, you would have to go to Node.js download and follow the instructions to download Node.js and NPM here. And I would also recommend that you download PNPM. And I'll just briefly go over the difference. Whenever you install a project with NPM, it installs all the dependencies again and again, while with PNPM, it installs the dependencies somewhere else and then it just links them to your projects. So not only will you download the projects faster, but also you will save a lot of storage. Back to Astro, we'll paste what we had earlier, but I'll just put a P in front of it and just press enter. And now we will wait for it to download all the files. We will see this cute little face here talking to us and helping us through the project. So it asks us, what is the name of this project? Let's call this Astro New. And then ask us what kind of project we want. You can get some templates right away. Let's just go with the basic for now. And yes, install dependencies. Yes, initialize a new Git repository. This is how we'll do branching later at the end, but let's just leave that for later. Once that is done, you can enter the project by writing cd Astro new or whatever you named it. And cd stands for change directory. So we will enter this project. And now you can open this with your preferred code editor. I have VS Code, which you can open it by writing code period. If you have cursor, it's cursor period. But if you don't have any of them, you should download one of them. And now that this is open, we can look at how this is structured. I'm going to try to walk through this as if I am trying to look at a Webflow project and understand it, and we'll see how this maps to Webflow. So if we want to go to the homepage, we have to open the source. That's where most of the project files will be. Then we go to pages. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then we have index. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, so I'm here from the future to tell you. If you start up your VS Code and there are no colors on the text, you have to go to your plugins and install the Astro plugin. I also recommend the Prettier and the Tailwind plugin, and we might add some more later. You should also go to your settings down here, go to settings and look for format, and then make sure that format on save is turned on. So every time you save your file, it gets formatted correctly. index is the homepage here. And when we open this, we are greeted with a layout and a welcome component. We already know what components are, obviously, from Webflow, but what we're not used to maybe is a layout component. In Webflow, if you have a nav and a footer, you have to place them in every page that you have, while here you can just place a layout, and not only can you put your nav and your footer, any kind of custom code can go into the layout, so you don't have to put it multiple times. So you can just import the layout instead of importing every component that you want in every page. And then here they chose to use a component as a page, but for now we can just delete this in order to see what else we can do. The first thing I usually do in a Webflow project is define my variables. And unfortunately, this basic example doesn't come with a way to see the CSS here directly, but there's two ways we can do CSS here. One is we can right click on source and create a new folder. Let's call this styles. And then inside styles, we'll create a new folder called global.css. And this is where you can put your global CSS, just some basic styles, and you can put your variables by typing :root, and then in here you can just start typing your variable name. So maybe this we want a color accent, and this can be whatever you want. And then we would just have to go to our layouts, open that global layout that we have, and at the top we will use our first Astro specific thing, which is front matter, which is just 3 dashes, and then in here we can write import. We'll put /style/global.css. The double period means go up a folder, so it will go from here up to the source, and then it will go to styles and global CSS. And if I save this, that variable should be available everywhere. You might have noticed something else though. We already have some styles here, but they're not inside the body and they're not inside the head. They are outside of the entire HTML document, which is odd. This is again something that Astro components give you, where you can write your styles inside a component and they will be scoped to that component. This does come with something that you might find a little annoying. We can see this if we open the terminal by pressing Control and backtick, or you can go to View and click Terminal here. And now here we can write PNPM dev, or if you're using npm run dev. We'll run this, and once we get the URL, we can command and click on it, or control click if you're on Windows. And this is empty, of course, because we did delete the welcome page. So let me actually go back and put that welcome page here, save just to see it. And we can press F12 to open our DevTools. And immediately you will see something here. On the body and the HTML, there is this really long, ugly data attribute that you may not want to be in your HTML. And this will be in every component inside that has to be styled. The reason Astro does that is so that it can scope the styles into a specific component. This means over here, you are targeting the HTML and body, and it will only target them in this file. If you had a heading here and you targeted it by writing H1, it will only target the H1s that are in this specific file, not anything outside or as children of this layout. Normally, you don't put global CSS here. This is just for this file. And we can get rid of those data attributes, but just copying this, removing the style tag, and then we'll go to our global CSS and paste this down here. And if we go back to our browser over here, we can see that the HTML is clean now and the body, so we don't have these extra attributes. If you do use the scoped styles, unfortunately, you cannot avoid these, but they are useful and they're not really a big deal, other than if you care about your HTML looking very clean. So normally whenever you start a new project, you would already have some kind of starter CSS file that you import, and you have all your variables already there, and you just change the values of these variables so that you can start with the project immediately. And many people use Tailwind, which helps you with this a lot. And I would recommend Tailwind even if you don't want all their utility classes, because you don't like these huge class names with a bunch of utility classes. You can still use it in a very nice way within any project. If we go back to the Astro site and we go to integrations, we can look here for Tailwind. And then when we click here, it will tell us to go to this one here. And it gives us this command where we can immediately add Tailwind to our Astro site, and we don't have to do everything manually. So let's go back to our Astro site. I'm going to make this a little bigger and open a new terminal. Let's paste this command here. Astro will ask us if it's okay, and yes, continue. And now Tailwind is in this project, but we do have to make just a few adjustments. at the top of our global.css, we will type @import Tailwind CSS, and this will import Tailwind in our CSS project. And Tailwind comes with some really good defaults, so we can actually get rid of this. And now we can define our theme by typing @theme, and then we can take our variable from up here and paste it here. And when we save, we should be able to go back to our page over here. Maybe we'll put an H1 and press enter. What I just did was a feature in VS Code where you can start writing the tag of a component, and when you press enter, it will put the tag there for you. It will also put the cursor right in the middle so you can write the text immediately. So let's say hello world here. Whoops. And let's type class. And now if we write text dash, we should start seeing the autocomplete that Tailwind gives you. This is not something you would have by default. This is a feature of Tailwind, and it's really useful to have. And you can already see that we have text accent here, which is the color that I defined in my CSS. And if you just put it there and save, obviously this is just black, so we're not going to see anything different. But if we open our preview again, maybe let's put it on the side like this, and let's go to our global.css and change this to something like blue. And now we have a blue heading. You might have noticed it also is a very small text here. By default, Tailwind also removes all the sizes from the headings so that you don't have the default pixel sizes that headings have. Just because something has a higher level of a heading doesn't mean that it has to be bigger. Styles and semantic HTML is different, obviously. So we can make this bigger by going back to index and writing here text 2x large, sure. And we have a bigger heading. But like I said earlier, you don't have to do everything with utilities. You can go back to global.css, and under theme, we can define our own classes. So we can say add utility, and we'll call this heading 1. And you can either write this in regular CSS, so we can say font size 3rem, or you can even apply Tailwind classes by writing @apply. And now you can type in Tailwind classes in here, and it will apply the styles. It just, sometimes it is faster. But let's keep that and maybe even make it blue. And then we save this. And if we go back here and delete these, and if we start typing heading, you will see that we still get this nice autocomplete by Tailwind. So let's stop playing around and actually build something here. Let's get rid of these two elements here. And what I usually do in a new page, I always add a main tag. And then inside the main, you might have a section. Inside the section, I will have a container, which is not really a tag itself. It's a class. So we can type div period container. Whoops. And if you type it this way, it will give you a div with the class of container, which is a nice way to quickly get this element out. And this is my typical section structure. We can go back to our Tailwind and create a new utility. We'll call it container, and we'll add a max width and a margin inline auto and a width of 100%. And this should be fine for now. And let's go back here, and in here, let's put a heading, and we're just going to build like a CTA section with a form. So let's say sign up to the newsletter or something. I actually forgot to put some padding on the container. So we're going to go padding inline 1.5 rem should be fine. And I do want all my sections to have some kind of default padding. Tailwind supports layers, so we can go down here and type add layer base. And this is the base layer that will be the first CSS that will be applied to something. And here we can put our section styles, and we get the padding over here. And the reason we put this in base is so that we can override it with like a combo class or a utility class later on. Back to here, we're gonna also add a paragraph. I'll put some lorem ipsum here. There we go. And let's give this a class. Whoops, text. Let's do 4XL, maybe too big, 3XL. And let's also do some bottom margin. So MB is margin bottom. We'll do 2. And then we want a form down here. So let's type form. We won't do an action now, but we'll do label. And we don't need the for. We can just put a span in here and call it name. And under the span, we'll put an input, and this will be type text. Name is name. And the input looks invisible. Don't worry, we just have to style it again. We'll go back here and we'll add input, And let me just add some styles here. So just a simple input here. Let's also do some margin on top of the form. So let's go class, margin top, and we'll go with like 6. Over here, we're gonna copy this and just paste it down and go email. It will be type email, and the name will be again email. We can make this form a flex, and flex col makes it a column. And now we can do gap for. And just to mix and match, let's also put a card class over here. We'll copy this and go to our global. Once again, we'll make this a utility. We'll say card, and in here, I'm just gonna put some styles. And I know it's not the prettiest thing, but I'm not here to teach you design. But this is a good opportunity to talk about components. So we have this label twice, and you have to always remember to have the same structure. And that's when you usually wanna make a component. So we can copy this label, and up here in components, we can create a new file and call it input.astro. And in here, we're gonna paste this. And then up here, we'll put some from matter, and we need to define the props that it will take. So we'll say const, we'll have a label, type, and name. And this will be astro.props. This just tells Astro that this component will have these 3 props, and we can pass them into this component. In our element itself, we can get rid of email here and do brackets, label. At the type, we can get rid of email again and make it type. And at the name, we can do the same thing. And now back at our page, we can delete both of these, and we'll start typing left arrow input. I think because it's the same name as a regular input, it doesn't autocomplete it for you. Maybe that's not very convenient. So maybe we'll change this to field. Let's go back there and let me try field. And now my editor will import the component for me, so we don't have to go up here and manually import the component. This field now takes a name of name, label, name, and type is text. And then I'll copy this over and we'll do email, and this is email, and email again. And just like that, we have a component. And just going to the component, if you want to change the styling of this and you open the component, there is no clear indication of how this is styled. And this is where the scoped styling comes in. Instead of having these down here, we can actually copy this and go back to our field. And now we can put this here. So now we know that this input has this CSS because we have it inside the component itself. And not only that, but if it happens that we are using an input somewhere else and we don't want it to be styled the same way, then this will not affect the other inputs. And components are really just that easy. One of the coolest features that Astro has, and I don't see many people talking about, is the islands. And although it sounds like something magical, it is actually a very simple concept. By default, Astro has no JavaScript whatsoever unless you put any JavaScript in it. You can inspect the page and you'll see there's no JavaScript being shipped into your page. And islands just make it so that you can run JavaScript when you want and also load the JavaScript whenever you want. And this is usually paired with a different framework, meaning you can use React, Svelte, or Vue inside Astro, which is one of its best features. And it allows you to experiment with other frameworks without having to commit to their backend framework like Next.js or SvelteKit or Nuxt. And we can see how that works here. So let's put a simple component under this form where it we're just going to make a simple counter. It's just going to be a number. We're going to click on it and it's going to go up. We'll do it with Astro first because it's going to be very similar to what you would do inside Webflow. And then we'll do it with a framework so that you see what is the advantage of using a framework. We'll go to components. Let's make it a counter.astro. And in here, we're going to have a button and we'll write clicked. Let's do a span. I will give this an ID of count and let's start with 0. And then down here, you can just put your regular script as you would do in Webflow. We'll do const count equals document dot query selector and we'll do ID count. We'll also grab the button. So we'll say button equals document query selector button and we'll say let number equals 0. Down here, we'll do button, add event listener, click. Then it takes a function. In here, we'll do number ++, which will increase the number. And then we just do count dot inner HTML equals number. And here TypeScript is complaining about this being a number. We can just do to a string. And because count could potentially not exist, we will have to do, if there's no count, return. So that was quite a bit. Let me also put some classes. And we'll go back to our page and just go under this form and we'll go counter, and then we'll close this. And now we have the counter here. And if I click, we see that it goes up. But you are not in Webflow anymore. You don't have to do things this way. You have access to components with React or any other framework, and we can do things in a much more powerful way and much easier and just control the entire component. So if I go back to Astro and go to resources, integrations, I'll look for Svelte. That's my favorite framework. And down here, it just gives me this command to add Svelte. So we'll go back here. Let's create a new terminal because I lost it. Just paste that. We'll say yes to everything. And it's adding a few things into our project to set up Svelte for us. Now what we can do to see islands in action, we can go to components and let's make this a counter.svelte this time. And it asks me if I want to add the Svelte for VS Code extension. Yes, let's add this, close this. And now we'll write the same but much simpler counter in Svelte. So I'll copy the button from our other component. We don't need the ID here. And instead of 0 here, I'll just write count. And then up here, we'll do a script. Let count equals $state. That's how you do reactive state in Svelte. And then all we have to do is go to this button. I don't like this formatting, by the way. Let me do this. And we'll do on click. We need a function. And we'll just do count ++. And that's basically it. That is so much simpler. We don't have to do all of this document selector things or any of this stuff. We can just do count and increment the count. And now to make it work, we can go back to Astro. And up here, instead of importing counter.astro, I'll import counter.svelte. And you'll see something weird. If I click here, this does not work. And it's not because we wrote the component wrong. It's because Astro by default does not ship any JavaScript. We already said this, but this is where you see it in action, where Astro will go over the component and will render the HTML of that component, and we'll just stop there. In order to make it interactive, we create an island. And like I said, it's nothing too crazy. All you have to do is go to your component and type client, and it gives you the different options. Idle just loads the JavaScript whenever the page is not doing any other task anymore. Load is after the page loads, which is probably your default. Media uses some kind of media query. Client only will not render the HTML on the server. It will wait until the page loads to even add the component into the page. And visible means it will wait until the component scrolls into view in order to load the JavaScript. This is really powerful to have built into the framework. So for this, I'm just going to go with idle. And if I save and start clicking here, now we have the component working just fine. So islands, super simple. We just decide when do we want the JavaScript to load. And you can use this to mix and match React and Svelte and whatever else in order to test the different frameworks and see which one you prefer. If you're using AI, obviously it knows React best, but I would highly recommend looking at other frameworks and seeing how fun it can be to just use them and just learn about them and how they work, how much more performant they can be than React, etc. So now that we did so much work, we want to save our progress and maybe want to make a branch for our staging domain. Although Git has a lot of commands that you would have to learn, you can also use the sidebar here from VS Code. You can just open this and type in a message here. We can say, usually the first commit is called initial commit that we see down here. And now we can write here what we changed. And it wasn't something specific. I'm just going to put a bunch of updates and we'll commit this. It will ask if we want to stage all changes before committing. Let's say yes, this just makes things easier. And then we'll click on publish. When you do this, it will ask you to log in with GitHub and choose if you want this to be private or public. We're going to make this private over here. And then we can close these notifications. And we can make a new branch by clicking on the main branch over here. And we'll call this staging. Let's say we want to make changes on the staging branch, and maybe I want to go to this form and add some bottom margin because it looks terrible, 10. That's better. And now we'll say we added a new feature where we added spacing for a button. We'll commit this and publish the branch. And just like that, you made a branch for your staging domain, and you can switch back to main by clicking here and selecting main. And now we're back to our main branch. And just like that, we're going to also publish it on Vercel and see how our staging and main environment looks like. Once you log into Vercel and click on new project and sign in with your GitHub, you can now import projects in your GitHub repository. So we can see here that my newest project is this Astro new, and we can click import. It identifies that it's made with Astro, so it will set our defaults for us, which will be useful because otherwise you would have to configure some special commands for it. And then you can just click deploy. It takes a few seconds, and now we have a deployed project over here. Let's click on continue to dashboard, and we can go to deployments, click on create deployment. And if we had deployed this to Vercel before creating the branch and pushing it up, it would have picked it up by default. But because we didn't, we're just going to have to add it here the first time manually. It's actually not seeing it here, so I'm just going to type staging here. And it found this, and it will call it a preview. Let's create a preview deployment. And now it will take a few seconds for this to publish. Once this is ready, and it was faster because it could use some cache, we can click on preview here and look at our staging domain. So now we have the staging opened, and we can go back to Vercel, click on production and see the production build as well. And you can do this as much as you want. You can have as many staging environments as you want. You will have to do some work to merge them together correctly, but unless you're messing with the same code on multiple branches, you should be fine. But let's see how we can pull our changes from staging into main. Back in VS Code, while we are in main, we can click on the three dots. We can go to branch, merge, and select staging. You can see that it brought in the changes, so it does have this. And then all we have to do is click on sync, yes, and we can go back to our Vercel here, and we can see the deployment start happening automatically for us. If nothing goes wrong, it automatically promotes it to production. If it fails for whatever reason, it's gonna keep your old production environment on, so you never go offline just because you have some mistake in your code. For whatever reason, this was not what we wanted, and we wanna roll back to our previous deployment. All you have to do is click on the three dots here and click on instant rollback, and we'll publish this version of the site instead. And if you wanted a specific branch to be your production environment instead of your main, all you have to do is come here and click on promote to production. So that's mostly it. I wasn't sure how many of these I should include because they're not specific to Astro, but they are very tied to how you would build with Astro. So I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, I would appreciate a like and subscribe.